Welcome to the Complete Streets Commission's March 8th regular commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in the city council chambers in accordance with public health guidelines. Let's begin with a roll call. I would like to introduce Complete Streets Commission members and city staff present. I'm Chair Sally Cole. Commissioners present include Brian Ottman, Katie Baruzzi, Jackie Sebrian, Lisbeth King, and Christopher Coleman. City staff present include Kevin Chen, Hugh Louch, and Patrick Palmer. Patrick, where is Patrick? Let's see. Would you please provide instructions to the commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole and members of the Complete Streets Commission. I'm hoping everyone can hear me. Welcome everyone to the March 8th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you all for attending. At this time, we ask that the members of the commission to please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones. Not sure how relevant this is with everyone in person, but staff will also engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and respond to members of the commission. For members of the public who wish to provide public comment for any item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on that item, our virtual attendees may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, you can press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name, and then you can step up to the podium to make your comment. This concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. We'll move on to reports and announcements. Under reports and announcements, city staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Kevin, do you have any reports and announcements?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. If you give me 1 second here. So first of all, welcome everybody. This is our first meeting in the council chambers. So
Yes.
And members of the public, please do excuse us for any technical difficulty or any other difficulties that we might have for the evening. So let's get that out of the way first. Staff, we do have a few items that we want to city council actions that we want to update you on. First and foremost, as many of you know, Middle Avenue, we went through the city council and got some really fruitful conversations and directions. Ultimately, the city council voted to start a trial, and the trial consists of removing parking along Middle on both sides in favor of buffer parking, a buffer bike lane. So again, this is along the entire stretch. Currently, we're anticipating to go through our design phase and hopefully have the trial be implemented on the road by summertime or so. So that way we can kind of lead that into the school year and hopefully have a successful pilot. Also, for some of you might know the grade separation project, which is one of our more key projects within the city. The city council had a session on the fully elevated option, and they ultimately voted to not pursue that any further and instead continue to pursue the hybrid option. So for some of you that might not be in tune with that project, the hybrid option essentially is having the railroad track, be separated from the roadway, and the difference would be carry over half above ground, half below ground. So that's why we call it the hybrid, so to speak. Of course, as you very well know now, the City Council also awarded the Ravenswood resurfacing project, which hence allowed us to implement the westbound Ravenswood bike lane pilot that is currently underway. So definitely hope you guys all go by, either driving by it, walk to it, or even bike to it, which would be greatly appreciated. We do anticipate to get a survey going for us, hopefully to get that going next week.
Okay.
And the idea obviously is to collect as much feedback as we can on the pilot itself. So do help us spread the word, and hopefully we get a high participation rate on that pilot. A couple other things, just housekeeping items for the city. One is that our commission recruiting deadline is 5 p.m. on Friday, April 7th. So as you know, we technically have 2 vacancies. So talk to your neighbors, talk to anybody that wants to serve on a commission. Hopefully you can share your experience with them positively, and then they would like to apply.
April 17th?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean April?
April 7th. Yes, sorry. 5 p.m. April 7th. It's a Friday. And then lastly, the City Council goal setting meeting. This is our City Council's annual work plan priority workshop is set on Saturday, March 18th. Saturday, March 18th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you do plan to participate, you can do so either in person or online via Zoom as well. So with that, I will conclude my announcements.
Kevin, those updates were great. I just had a few follow-up questions. Regarding Middle, thank you for the update on the timeline. Is it the case that the stop sign at San Mateo and Middle has been installed already?
Yes, it has.
Part of it?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, because I heard some questions about that.
Yep.
And then the survey with Ravenswood, the bike lane, West Bike Lane, will that go out as a postcard to sort of the neighboring folks, or how will you do the survey?
It'll be an online survey,
Okay,
and then we'll do our best to get the words out through all sorts of means possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
And then the city council priorities meeting that you mentioned on Saturday, May 18th, since there are members of the public present, we should mention that they can attend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The workshop, the City Council workshop, the priority workshop is available for everybody. So yes, definitely welcome all residents and members of the public to attend as well.
Yes, thank you
Mhm.
so much. All right, we will move on to our public comment. Under public comment, members of the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject that is not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to, non-agenda issues brought up under public comment rather than to provide general information. Patrick, can you please call for general public comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole. For members of the public who might have recently joined us and wish to provide public comment on this item, please just raise your virtual hand, or if you're calling in, press *9. And it looks like we have one public speaker already, and Virginia Portillo, you are now the public commenter.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to comment in regards to the communication and how you guys will be communicating this information over, in particularly to the Bellhaven area. And I would like to see how that plays out as far as sending out information. I know you guys send out a newsletter, but Bellhaven, I think, needs a little bit more of communication attention. I'm not sure where the break is happening, but I just wanted to inquire about the efforts that will be done to communicate this workshop and also the postcard that you guys will be sending out. Thank you.
Virginia, I'm just going to ask you a clarifying question. Are you talking about the communication regarding the City Council Priorities Workshop? Communication
Correct.
about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I know the City Council has been communicating around that. Do you, Kevin, can you shed any light about that? Or you're Virginia, my clarifying question is that, and also your point is that your neighbors in Bellhaven aren't hearing about things like this?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a little bit concerned. Some of the meetings I've attended with other nonprofit organizations that are doing efforts within this area are not knowing about meetings as such. And so I just want to inquire about that. Thank you.
So let me speak. So
Yes.
this is Hugh Louts, the Assistant Public Works Director for Transportation. So just for clarification, the goal setting workshop is not related obviously just to transportation, but to everything the city does. And it's something that the city traditionally does every year, but the pandemic did kind of create some gaps in that. What I can say, I think, to your the concerns is that we can pass those on back to our city manager, assistant city manager, who are managing that process, and ask them to look into
Yes.
how information is being shared.
That's perfect. Just because I know you guys are hosting this workshop and you guys have these meetings, I think this is my first time attending this meeting. So thank you for having a virtual option or this option for me to join. But in general, I think, again, the communication, I'm inquiring to it because I think this area is not aware about these updates and maybe workshops that may be available for them. Thank you.
I just have one more clarifying question. Sorry, Virginia, but it might be helpful to reach out to Vice Mayor Cecilia Taylor, who represents Bellhaven, if you have suggestions regarding better ways to reach yourself, the nonprofits you're working with in that community. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I just want to add, I could be wrong on this, but I think I read an email that sending comments before the meeting, I think they wanted them by Friday, the 10th. So this Friday, if you want to send comments before that meeting, this Friday is the deadline for that.
Thank you, Commissioner, Vice Chair Sebrian. All right, Patrick?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole. It looks like we have another public speaker. This time it is coming from Sherry. You are now the public commenter.
I'm not sure if this is the moment for me to speak. I just didn't see anything listed after E2. So I want to make a comment about that.
Sherry, thank you for clarifying that right off the bat. We're taking public comments on E2 in just a few minutes after we go through a few agenda items.
Okay, fine. Thank
Sure,
you.
no problem. Thank you very much. Patrick, anything else?
It does not look like we have any other public comments at this time, so I will return the meeting to the chair.
Thank you. We'll proceed with regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The first regular business item tonight is E1. Accept the Complete Streets Commission minutes for February 8th, 2023 meeting. Is there any clarification from the commission before I take public comment on those minutes? No? Patrick, please call for public comments on this item.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for anyone who might have joined us recently, just press *9 if you're calling in, or raise your virtual hand if you have a comment on this issue. Does not look like we have any.
No. Kevin, I just had a comment on the minutes to praise the staff, because I felt when we had the discussion in that meeting around the conditions we would like to be present for when staff streamlines the process for parking spot removals, that was very well captured in the minutes. We had some very granular feedback around that, and I wanted to thank you for including the minutes so carefully. All right, well, do I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes? Okay, Katie, Commissioner Ruzzi has a motion to accept. Any seconds? All right, Vice Chair Sebrian, seconds.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So we do have a first and a second on the table. So for commissioners that would like to vote yes, if you can go ahead and raise your hands. Thank you very much. Unanimous. Thanks.
All right, minutes are approved. Moving on to E2. This is what Sherry had referred to. E2 item is to provide feedback on a proposed pilot quick build intersection improvements at Menlo Avenue and University Drive. Staff, Hugh Louch, Assistant Public Works Director of Transportation, will introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair Cole. And nice to be with all of you today and in person in the chambers. This is feels oddly familiar and yet different. So wanted to walk you through some work that staff has been doing over the last really more than a year to look at conditions at this intersection of Menlo and University and to think about some things that we can do to potentially improve, in particular, pedestrian safety at that intersection. So what I'll do is describe what we're asking for from you today, talk about what the conditions are and what we have seen in the safety data that we have available from our police records, talk about what the options are, and then the kind of traffic analysis, and then we'll circle back to that request. And you can see sort of a general map of near the downtown area and the location of the particular intersection. And it is a bit of an odd intersection, I should note. It's skewed with obviously Menlo Avenue having a lot of shops and businesses along it, and Draeger's right there at the corner. And then across the street, there's the parking lot that people use, one of the parking lots people use to go when they go to Draeger's to shop. And then the sort of skewed portion, accesses a number of residences right there on the other side of the street. So the basic request we have for you today is just to get direction on a potential project, really with a focus on trying to enhance the safety at the intersection. And we call it a quick build project because the objective here is not to build permanent infrastructure, but to instead try to test out some ideas to see how they work to help inform other sort of future improvements. And one of the things to know about this intersection is that we are at a point where fairly soon we need to replace some of the pavement in the crosswalk, which has got some deterioration. It's got kind of a brick pattern on it, and it hasn't held up as well as desired. And so as we get to that, we want to sort of inform that process by seeing if we can do some things that make the crossing a bit safer. So we call that a quick build. We use striping, we use bollards or posts to help sort of separate some space, paint, things like that, that really enable us to test some things without making, use of concrete and other things that then we might regret and need to take out later. So it's a way to test things out. So just to focus in on the existing conditions, this is the intersection in question, and I've highlighted the crosswalk that's of concern in particular. I think when you look at this intersection, many people probably look at the other crosswalk, which is got a jaunty little movement there. But actually, from the safety data, almost every collision that we've seen at this intersection is in the crosswalk across Menlo. And that's kind of the primary area of concern for us. And we've heard that from, residents. We've heard a number of concerns.
I think people are having trouble hearing.
I'm not close enough.
Yeah.
I apologize. Should I start over?
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Or go back to the part where you were talking about the data.
Well, I'm about to talk about the data.
Can you hear all right in the front row there? Okay, thank you.
I apologize.
Thank you, thank you,
Let
Commissioner.
me get closer to the microphone. So all I just want to convey on this is kind of the crosswalk of interest that's highlighted in that little sort of reddish brick colored box. And you can see also, some of the aspects of this, right? There's a through lane on University and a left turn lane. Because of the skew, there's this keep clear kind of area. And then you have a right turn lane and a left turn lane on Menlo as you kind of head, approximately westbound. So that's the sort of existing conditions. So we did, as I mentioned, look at safety data over a number of years. And you can see this is the data from 2016 through last year. And you can see some years were great, no collisions at all. And other years had quite a few, including last year where there were 4 separate pedestrian collisions at the intersection, as well as one with a parked vehicle. And 4 collisions, it happens, is about 1/4 of all pedestrian collisions we had in the city last year. So that's quite a lot, and certainly something that's of concern to us as staff. And you can see that it's not the first time that's been the case. So certainly something that we want to take a little bit more of a focused look on it. And it has been something we have been looking at for a little while. So we developed essentially two concepts that we wanted to talk to you about and get your feedback on, and they are sort of additive. So because Menlo itself is the main crossing of concern, the basic concept is to test out a set of bulb outs that would extend from the curb on each side and reduce the lanes as you come sort of westbound on Menlo Avenue into a single left-right turn lane, since it effectively ends at University Drive. And that's the most basic thing that we want to do. And again, like I said, we would use bollards, we would use paint, potentially, we would use some other sort of basic, easily removed materials to try out that. We would also stripe on top of that existing crosswalk with a high visibility crosswalk. And so when we talk about high visibility crosswalk, we really mean the types of crosswalks like the existing one that crosses University, where instead of just a set of parallel lines, you have the kind of striping across that enables people to be seen more easily. And there's pretty good evidence that those have quite a significant actually benefit for folks who are crossing. And then the second concept really just builds on that, and to also consider a potential bulb out on University Drive and to reduce the capacity of that also to a single left through lane. And one of the reasons why we are looking at these options is that as a pedestrian and as a driver, the more pieces of information that you have to process as you approach an intersection, the more complicated that intersection gets and the harder it is to successfully navigate it without having a potential risk. So, the traditional intersection, we often talk about the number of sort of points of potential conflict that you might run into, and that's just with a single approach leg. But every additional lane you add essentially multiplies that and increases quite significantly, because now you're not just dealing with one potential vehicle, you're dealing with two potential vehicles, and you run into a situation that's sometimes called a double threat, where you might be trying to cross one vehicle and then another vehicle is making a different move, and it can be quite challenging. So those are situations we like to avoid from a safety perspective, especially where we don't think they are needed for capacity standpoints. So we took those two options, and we did want to make sure we understood what the potential challenges and benefits would be. And so we modeled them using some traffic analysis software, and you can kind of see the high level results here. So the table has all the details, but the high level summary is in the bullets above. So if we just remove that one lane from Menlo Avenue, you essentially get about a second and a half more delay for each vehicle that goes through the intersection, and about 10 to 20 feet of queue length. So a vehicle essentially, or a little bit less. And in the evening hours, you get maybe more like 3 seconds of delay or a little less per vehicle that they would wait. And then more like 30 to 55 feet of queuing. So 2 to 3, or, if they're small vehicles, maybe 4 vehicles that would be queuing there. So not a tremendous number. And then if you look at doing both Menlo Avenue and University Drive, as was in the second example, you can see those both increase a little bit. So in the AM, you have about 3 seconds. So it was about 1.4, now it's 3.1, and about 40 to 80 feet. So, kind of 2 to 4 or 5 vehicles. And in the PM, you have more like just under 5 seconds, and it was just under 3 before, and then more like 55 to 83 feet of additional queuing. So that's kind of just some general sense about what that potential impact would be on people traveling through the intersection. And so generally, we think that that is a manageable amount of additional delay and queuing to process through the intersection. And if you looked at the very fine details, you can see we do measure level of service, and there's never a point at which we're going below the standards set by our general plan. So before kind of coming back to the request, I did just want to focus on a couple other common requests we get or have gotten at this intersection, and we do get these at other intersections. So one is to install, what are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or sometimes as flashing beacons, or sometimes we call them RRFBs. And you guys have probably seen these all over town. We have quite a few in the downtown area, a lot on Santa Cruz. There's a new one at Blake, and they're in a number of other locations. And the key thing to know about these is that these are we can only install these at what are called uncontrolled crossings. So no stop sign, no signal, right? So it's not actually something that can be considered at this location because it's a stop controlled intersection. And then the other request we get is to potentially consider a signal. And that's certainly something that longer term could be considered. And there are sometimes benefits, with much more certainty who's going to be traveling at a signal than you do at a stop sign that has multiple lanes. But there's not, we don't necessarily think as staff that they would definitely meet a signal warrant. So it's not something that we could for sure do anyway. And it's quite a bit more expensive, obviously, as well, and would be something that we'd have to pursue kind of at direction of City Council. So those are just some pieces of information for your benefit. And so then just to kind of come back to what we're looking for is just to get direction on the two options that I shared with you. And to note that, kind of our next steps on this are, one, we would be doing some additional outreach, and we intend to do like a pop-up event in front of Draeger's or kind of right on that intersection corner, so that people who traverse that on a regular basis could stop by and find out about what's proposed. That'd probably be kind of late March or early April. And then we'd obviously need to inform City Council about what the intended plans here and get any feedback from them as well. And then from there, we would move into, implementing any kind of agreed on project. As I say, it would probably be something where we would do it for a number of months as a pilot, and then work to use that information to inform a sort of future permanent infrastructure investment when we replace the crosswalk. And with that, that's my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the commission before I take public comment? Commissioner King?
I wonder if you can shed some light on the pedestrian accidents that happened, and if they happened on that Menlo crosswalk, and if they happened on the crosswalk coming out of the lot or out of the shop.
That's a great question, Commissioner King. And so almost every collision that has occurred at the intersection has occurred in that Menlo crosswalk. In terms of the direction, I know of ones that have occurred in both directions, but more common is coming out across the parking lot, from the parking lot towards the store.
That's surprising.
But not exclusively.
Commissioner Coleman?
Yeah, so I'd like to touch on the angles in which vehicles turn left and turn right onto that side street. When they're turning right towards Draeger's, my concern here is that the car will go over into the opposite lane of travel with the distance of the bollards. So I'd really like to get an idea of what the distance is how far a vehicle has to turn out, if we can get that perspective, into the other lane and then back into their lane.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So you're talking about if we remove the right-hand turn lane, what's the change? So just to be clear, what you have in front of you is purely a concept. It is not a design drawing. It does not represent any particular angle of what that would be. That's something that we would do a little bit more design work on. Right now, that's quite a tight turn. And so we would not be making it any tighter than it is already today.
Should we put
Thank
up
you.
the display the drawing just so we?
I sure can.
I'll look the same thing.
Yeah, I know
Commissioner-
there's
oh,
some measurements already. Those are just in between the sidewalk itself, correct? So there's nothing of the extension of the bollards.
The measurement that is on the drawing is the space of the width of the lanes, I believe, is what's shown there.
So there's no measurement from curb or start of crosswalk there to the end of the bollard. And the bollards will extend out even so maybe 2 or 3 inches more because they're round.
Yeah, and again, what I would say is don't read anything into the placement of the yellow dots. They're yellow dots, and that is all. So all those considerations, those are really good considerations and important ones. And you're on to a sort of a critical thing here, which is like, how will we actually design it? And absolutely agree with you that there are considerations around the turning of vehicles. That's something that we would be, looking into a little bit more detail. One thing to note, and in this case in particular, where we're bringing this down to 1 lane, we are actually creating this little bit of additional space to account for turning vehicles in part, and to also just align the lanes a little bit better. Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt again, but this might even pose risk of the left turn lane due to if 2 cars are one is making that right turn, one is making the left, the one in the right has to make a wide turn. It's going back again to my comment about the vehicles making a right turn being overly wide in their turn going into the opposite lane of travel. This even if the lane was extended, since we're removing that additional left turn lane, my concern would still be pretty valid with the cars intertwining to the lanes.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Sebrian.
I think my question is kind of connected to Commissioner King's. Do we know if it's more like right turning cars onto Menlo or right turning cars off of Menlo? What those pedestrian accidents?
Yeah, so I don't have that right in front of me now, but and I believe it's some of both. But I know some of the recent ones have been right turning cars onto Menlo as people exit the kind of enter the intersection from the vicinity of the parking lot.
Any other commissioners have clarifying? Let me look at my notes 1 moment. Now this, I could ask this later if this isn't a clarifying question. Hugh, you'll let me know. But I wondered as you were speaking if there is any data that you happen to know of or studies about the correlation between adding bulb outs and pedestrian safety.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, indeed, there is a lot of research at the national level that we rely on for a lot of the kind of recommendations that we make. And certainly there's a well-known relationship between bulb outs increasing visibility for pedestrians who are crossing, right? It clarifies for folks that they are in fact crossing, right? Because they're not just sort of on the sidewalk, but actually kind of clearly entering the intersection. And then the other thing I would say that there's really good research on is that question of, how many different sort of points of conflict there are and the impact that has on potential pedestrian safety.
Okay, thank you about that. And then the second clarifying question I had was, I noticed on the diagram that it looks like we would be adding like a high visibility stripe on the crosswalk. And I'm wondering if in terms of increasing visibility of that crosswalk, this is very close to my house and I drive and walk this a lot. And my impression is that when you're going down middle toward University to make that right, it's quite dark, actually. It's just not the brightest lit area. And I wondered if we would ever consider doing like reflective kind of hockey pucks along the edge of the crosswalk or anything like that, just to make sure people saw it.
Good question. So there are, depends what you're talking about. Some of those things you can't do. And then there are a variety of kind of creative treatments that people use. And they're, the federal government sometimes doesn't like it when you are creative with your crosswalks. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but there are, we want to be a little bit, judicious about what it is that we could use. And I think to the extent that there's lighting, I know one of the issues that we hear about is the shadow cast by the trees, which you can kind of see a little bit in the diagram.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously a daytime issue. Certainly at nighttime, again, it would be longer term, but we could look into kind of lighting of the crosswalk itself.
I think that's a good idea. And maybe it's even about trimming back the trees too. But yes, I think that's, as you said before, it's a complicated crosswalk and that's more complications.
And I would just note that these collisions are not happening at night. They're not that they haven't, but they're not exclusively happening at night. A lot of them have happened during the day.
I noticed that. I think it said sort of midday, right? 11 to 1 type of lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. No, yes, Commissioner Seabrian.
Only because you asked a question, which then brought me to the second part of my question, and maybe it belongs later in the discussion, but because it wouldn't be complete if I didn't say the word bikes. So like, how do bulb outs go with bike safety? Like, is there, I know how this supports pedestrian safety, but I do have some like genuine concerns about how it impacts bike travel. And I'm just curious over the like use of bulb outs. Is there anything about the effect on bikes or not?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I really appreciate that. And I think for this particular situation, what we're proposing to do is to trial something. So actually, given the amount of space we have, there would be space for bikes who might be traveling along who didn't want to be in the lane at this point to kind of merge out of the lane and use that kind of bulb out space in the short term, obviously. On both of these streets right now, there are no bike lanes, right? So we're not talking about impacting bike lanes today. And again, one thing maybe just to note is that we have looked at a bunch of different ideas here, some of which might be better, and actually, as I sort of reflect on Commissioner Coleman's comments, we have looked at, what if we did a median in the middle instead of doing a bulb out on one side and things like that. And those are options. I think for the trial and for achieving the sort of shorter crossing distance, this is probably the most efficient way to do it. And I, after kind of talking with staff and working through a lot of different ideas, this is the one that we think would make sense to test. But that doesn't mean it would be what is necessarily permanent at this location for all the reasons I think that you all are mentioning. So then long term, to more directly address your question, certainly these would require bikes to merge into the lane if they were using this area, and they would need to be comfortable or to, dismount and walk. But I think it's a little bit of a question of like, how does that fit within what the long-term priorities are for this intersection and for the streets nearby? So.
Very helpful. Thank you. Any other commissioners?
No.
Yes, Commissioner Altman.
That does look like a bike path to me. There is a lot of bikes.
Oh, did you press to make it red? Just press it once. Yeah.
So there is.
It's not working. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Yeah. How's that? Two comments. One is generally that whole intersection is complex. There's a lot going on there, right? And to follow up the second comment, that is a bike route, right? It's a marked Menlo Park bike route. So there are bikes going down there, but generally it's complex. Keep clear, the striping, just the skewed nature of that intersection. There's a lot going on. I'm just wondering if it could be simplified so that a driver doesn't have to pay attention to a lot and, miss a pedestrian, for example. Because there's a lot of striping, just a lot going on that could be distracting to your average driver. One idea, just to kind of come to that point, would be to move the crosswalk across University up to the other corner, right? So it would act as another kind of stop signal for those people going north on University. Very few people actually, when I watched it, actually walked across University. So if you move the crosswalk there, that would be just simplifying that whole intersection a little bit. And then it would give those people making a right kind of nonstop turn around just another kind of thing to kind of slow them up.
So because we're getting away from clarifying questions, Commissioner Altman, hold that thought. And let's discuss that after public comment. Thank you very
Let me
much.
just say one thing about
Oh,
that.
yes,
It's an
please.
interesting idea and certainly, but it's very clearly a long-term idea because we would also have to put a new curb ramp in. So that's not a short-term quick build item.
Okay. Oh, no problem. Thank you. Patrick, can you, if we're done on the commission, can you please call for public comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole. I'd just like to clarify that we will first take public comment from our remote attendees, and then we will move to those attending in the council chambers afterwards. So that being said, it looks like we have a few public commenters, and the first is Mary Jane Leonard.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I live right at this intersection at the corner of University Drive and Menlo Avenue. So on your view right there, my house is that corner with the trees and the green where the bulb out would be on University. So I'm pretty familiar with the craziness that goes on here on a daily basis. I both drive in this intersection and I bike in this intersection. So thank you so much for thinking about how to make it better. One of the things that I want you to keep in mind is those of us who are driving into this intersection off of Menlo Avenue going, let's see, that would be eastbound. So the keep clear, that's for me and my neighbors. And it's really hard to get out onto University at school drop-off and pickup times at the moment. And I'm concerned that with the bulb out, we will have it even harder because people are pretty impatient. And if they're waiting even slightly longer, I'm worried about being able to get out at that time. Another concern of mine in the same vein is that I think the bulb out, this is option 2 I'm talking about, where the bulb out is both on Menlo Avenue and University Drive. It is going to make it really difficult for me to go northbound on University Drive, so to turn left out of Menlo Avenue. And similar concern, people, if they're waiting longer, are not very forgiving. So, and if there's less space, that's also a concern. Let's see. So just keep that in mind as you're doing the trial. I think you should definitely still do the trial. I am up for trying to make this intersection better, but just keep in mind those of us who are not the typical travelers in this intersection, but still this is where we live and it's important for us to have mobility. On the plan for the future about maybe doing single lane on University and Menlo Avenue, I think one of the commissioners said, just consider that if you're going to have bikes and cars in the same lane, a lot of those riders are middle school students, and drivers and middle school students probably need a lot of training to make that work in the long term. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next public speaker is Seamless Bay Area.
This is Adina Levin, and I often forget to log out in 2 different places, which is what's needed in order for me to be listed as myself, a Menlo Park resident, rather than the nonprofit organization, which is Seamless Bay Area, which is not on whose behalf I'm commenting. I'm commenting as a resident. I live very near the area. I live on Fremont and walk through this intersection maybe daily, sometimes more than daily. And so I am excited about the opportunities to make things safer for people walking across that intersection, and the numbers of injuries are really dismaying. So glad to see those safety improvements being considered. But also what I was in the staff report that talked about the long-term opportunity to remove some vehicle parking spaces in order to enable a bike lane. I think that that is a good direction to go in, because if drivers are going to be queuing and people with bicycles are going to be going through, including middle school students and younger people, I think that we are going to wind up seeing more people bicycling through that Draeger's parking lot, and more people bicycling on the sidewalk on University, in order to not have a small bike queue up behind a long line of cars, which feels kind of scary as someone using a bicycle. So I think that creating a bike lane would address that issue, and would strongly consider going in that direction. There is almost, as far as I can tell, always space in that Draeger's lot for the people that are driving there and need to park for Draeger's and the stores nearby, and the buildings, that the houses that are nearby do have driveways. So while it's a little bit more inconvenient to have to park in a driveway, that is something that will help avoid unintended encouraging people to bike in less legal ways. And then lastly, is there any look that's going into the pedestrian crossing across University at Santa Cruz? Because drivers try to drive over pedestrians very frequently. And so I think that's another thing to consider, that pattern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. It looks like next we have Sherry as the public speaker.
Thank you so much, commissioners. I have several things that I want to mention. The first is that what Hugh was saying about complications, a complicated intersection, I think that the bulb outs will greatly complicate the whole thing. And in fact, I sent all of you a copy of excerpt from an op-ed by Dave Price of the Daily Post back in, I think it was 2002. The city council put bulb outs on Santa Cruz Avenue. And I'll read you just a tad from there. Residents were irate. The safety features had narrowed the lanes of traffic, creating an obstacle course for drivers. It all came to a head on May 28th, 2002, standing room only city council meeting, and 50 people spoke, all opposing those, demanding that the bulb outs be removed. I don't want to see this happen again. I think it's a mistake to put bulb outs there. I live almost, the lady who spoke, Mary Jane, I live a block from you, Mary Jane. I live exactly in this area, and Mary Jane's going to be unhappy with me because I recommend that you actually take out the keep clear, that signage and that straight line, because I think one reason we're getting some unsafe left turns. And by the way, Kevin, I spoke with Kevin and he said most of the accidents are from drivers on University making a left turn on the Menlo Ave. And I think that intersection is too confusing. The way the stop sign is at a funny angle, kind of in the corner, and that keep clear, I think you simplify it, take the keep clear out and make it very clear, make that stop sign more dominant so people understand that's where you stop. Also, because some of them stop at the keep clear line, and I think they tend not to stop where they need to. And so I'm walking and or driving on both of those streets almost every day. And when I'm on Menlo Ave, making a left turn, waiting to make a left turn, already the way the configuration is, the left turners coming from University Drive almost hit me sometimes in my car. So it's already close. You put a bulb out there and I guarantee you're going to have accidents. So I would urge the commission to come up with other suggestions other than the bulb outs. And also one more thing, 2022 was when people got back from all the closures. May I just finish one moment here? So I think maybe we should wait another year and see if those accidents go down, because we just got back to normal life in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. I'd also just like to add, for anyone who might have joined recently, if you do have a comment to add on item E2, please just raise your virtual hand or press *9 if you are calling in. As it seems that we don't have any other remote public comments, I will return the meeting to the chair.
Oh, no one in person?
Through the chair, I do have 4 public speaker cards. So if I may, I'm going to go ahead and announce each speakers. And
Yes,
once your
thank
name
you.
is called, please do come up to the podium. Again, you have 3 minutes to make your comments. Our first speaker here tonight is John Jager.
Hello, all. Thank you for the chance to speak. These are just preliminary comments for me because where this goes, positive or negative, I'm not quite sure. As I listen, this whole thing gets more and more complicated. But I'm really glad that this is being addressed. 2 of our staff members were injured in that crosswalk, and I'd like to reemphasize that it is the crosswalk in option 1 that's being addressed in option 1. And the bulb outs, whether they complicate things more or not, just strike me with the way they shorten the distance of that crosswalk. And for pedestrians, the less time they are in the crosswalk, I think the safer they are. So they may complicate things, but then on the other hand, if we have fewer lanes of traffic converging there, that also uncomplicates things. So there's some kind of a trade-off there. As far as bicycles, a comment grabbed my attention. If we do end up with bicycles on the crosswalk, as was stated, this could be quite dangerous directly adjacent to the store. We have 2 store entrances, one right on the corner that we're mentioning, and another entrance just between Santa Cruz Avenue and Menlo. And those of you who know the store can relate to this. The store is built right out to the lot line. So I think visibility at those entranceways could be dangerous for any bicyclists that choose to go that route. To me, I like simple approaches to problems. We don't necessarily want to try to solve something that isn't going to be a problem. And for that reason, I would suggest taking it a step at a time. If you so choose, I would go for option 1, see how it goes, then perhaps proceed to option 2. One thing I noticed about the bulb out on Menlo at the store and closest to the store is that it juts out somewhat, and it doesn't look like an awfully drivable curve for someone driving. And perhaps if that was rounded a little bit more, that would be a good idea. So I'm glad to participate in the future with discussions with any of you. I did read all of the materials very carefully, very interested in this. And thank you for your time.
Excuse me, would you mind repeating your name? I didn't get
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. John Drager.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. So our second speaker of the evening is Catherine Milton.
Hello, and I'm grateful for this opportunity and grateful that the city is working on this. I live on Menlo Avenue, so I do not want that one little stop area taken away because we could never get out of our street and we'd just be living there all the time. I'm also walk a lot, and I probably go across that intersection across University at least once or twice a day. And I must say that even when I'm alone and when I have grandkids with me, I feel like I'm a moving target, and it's scary. It's frightening. I always try to get eye contact with the drivers to make sure that they're not going to hit me. And usually if they see you, they will not hit you. At least that's been my luck so far. I actually like both both plans. I think the thing that I like about them is the fact that it's going to simplify it by having one lane, because the problem you have is as a pedestrian is when you're walking, you can't see beyond some of the large cars. And so then you really don't know what you're getting into. So you just sort of stop and make sure it's okay, or someone else is driving in the other lane to come and would actually might hit you. So I think that the idea of starting off with a test to make one lane will be good. And I think with the exception of, from what I see, the time is in the middle of the day, that there's a little bit of traffic, but for the most part, I don't think I personally didn't think it would make much time difference. The only other big suggestion I would give is to think of also down the line a little bit of creativity. I did collect some pictures of what's been done in other parts of the country, including California and in Europe, people drawing designs in the intersection, like the big circle, because I think we might want to make a statement that this is the most dangerous intersection in town and we want people to be more careful. And I was thinking that design and having it done as a real art project and maybe even a competition might be something fun for the city and a good thing for the city and would bring attention in a good kind of way. And I will be glad to share with the traffic department some of the, there were like about 20 cities that have done this. And I do think that color should be used. And I guess in terms of the bubbles, what I would suggest is to have those not be colored, but to look more like the sidewalks. And so I think that would make it less confusing. I think if you have those colored, it's going to be a little, I wasn't sure about the design. It looked like it was going to be colored. And I would think it might be too confusing. I would try to keep it simple, like there's crosswalks, there's street, and there's sidewalks. And I guess the only other thing I'll add is to say, I also agree that the intersection at Santa Cruz and University is very dangerous for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So our third speaker is Marge Gordon.
Thank you very much. I think the concern I have is going from Santa Cruz Avenue to Menlo. You've got a right turn lane off of Santa Cruz. You've got a straight lane, and that straight lane, people want to turn into draggers. And then you've got the people trying to merge. So you get them all together and you're going to have that big, right now, it is a big, you can't get through there, and cars back up trying to get onto Santa Cruz Avenue when there's a light there. So you've got a bottleneck there to begin with, and then you put them down to one lane. You've got to do something to help those people turn into Drager's Lot. The other thing that we have, and I reiterate this, If you take away that keep clear sign, you've got to do something for us residents that are on the cul-de-sac. We cannot get out of that, our street. In the morning, it's almost impossible. And there was an officer there a few weeks back. They had a field day with people running that stop sign and not letting us out, or we get out through one lane of traffic and you're trying to turn left to go down to Santa Cruz Avenue and they're coming down the other side. It's very dangerous through there. I mean, I understand you're talking about pedestrians, and yes, it is very dangerous, but on the same aspect, you've got to think about what to do with the cars coming out of the cul-de-sac. Thank you.
Thank you. So our last speaker of the evening is Michael Clausen.
Good evening. My name is Michael Clausen. I live at 978 Menlo Avenue, which is the cul-de-sac, the end of Menlo. And a lot of people have already mentioned that that's very tough to get out of there, but I want to talk about a couple other things. We've got two big issues here: pedestrian safety and traffic flow. And to some degree, they're in conflict because you want to get the traffic moving through there, but you've got to figure out a way for people not to be hit there. And the danger is that there's going to be increased traffic at that intersection. Once this huge development is finished on El Camino, and especially now that we have so hard to get through Santa Cruz down where all the little, what do you call them?
Parklets.
Right. It makes it very tough. And also, as mentioned, the corner of Santa Cruz and University is a very dangerous intersection too. I was there one day when a woman ran around the corner and knocked over the fire plug. So they moved the fire plug back so that people wouldn't hit it again. I'd like to see, I support exploring these two options to see whether it works. I have a bigger vision. I know John Drager is not going to like this. I'd like to see a roundabout there. I'd like to see a roundabout that encroaches on that, on the corner where his parking lot is. I've already designed one. You can come out of Menlo, you go all the way around, and you only have 3 entrances and exits on the roundabout. The entrances would be the 2 University ends and the 1 Menlo Avenue end. The other Menlo Avenue end would be offset, so that would go out to the University one before it hit the roundabout. It require a lot of space, and we have to cut down trees and probably do eminent domain or something, so it may not work. But roundabouts really do work, and I'd like to see you consider something like that. But and bicycles really complicate matters too. And I'm a big fan of bicycles. I do some bicycling myself. But boy, that intersection, and as my wife mentioned earlier, boy, you've got to make eye contact there. People are in rushes these days. They're really hurrying. So I really commend you, this commission, and the city council and the staff for addressing this issue. And I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe that at this point, that's all the speakers we have. So I return the meeting back to you.
All right. Thank you. I thank you to the public, both remote and present, for offering your opinions. They're very helpful to us, and we agree with you. This is a very important intersection. So I'd like to ask the commission for feedback on the staff's recommendation. Would anyone like to start? I guess maybe Commissioner Altman, since you started addressing your thoughts around some solutions, do you want to pick up that conversation that you started at the end of the clarifying question section?
I think Hugh answered it, actually.
You're okay with it?
Yeah,
Okay.
he said that that was out of an immediate actionable item to move the crosswalk.
Long term. Okay.
Right.
All right, let me go back to my notes. I'll kick it off with a couple comments. So I do agree, Michael, I think your name was, I do agree that this is a classic where pedestrian safety is so important, and yet we want to keep traffic flowing, and of course, in light of increased traffic coming down the pike. I was intrigued, Hugh, when you said that one of the potential solutions that your staff considered was a median in the middle. And I wondered if you could help me understand some of the pros and cons of putting a median in the middle of the crosswalk. You know, how would you expect it to change people's behavior, and how would you expect it, maybe ways in which you thought there were some negatives associated with it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And got myself in trouble there. I see. Based on, you know, our review of the collision data, I'm not convinced that a median at this stage, or purely a median, would solve the visibility challenges potentially that we're having of people kind of coming off of a crosswalk, and then either people coming from one direction making a left, the other direction making a right. It wouldn't help them be seen.
I see.
Right. So I think some amount of bulb out is probably needed. I think in terms of doing like a quick build project, adding a median to this mix would make it even more complicated. And so I wouldn't recommend that now. But it is something I think as we evaluate this and we think about a long-term picture, something that could certainly be considered. But it's really that review of the safety data, what's actually happening and what thing are we trying to solve for, that sort of pointed us in the direction of the bulb outs.
Yes, I can see that. I mean, a median does certainly pull one's attention as a driver to a crosswalk, but not necessarily to the sides of the crosswalk.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you can't when this gets maybe reconstructed and you can change the direction of some of the curb ramps and stuff like that, and maybe adjust the location of the crosswalk, you could, it could get, you know, as we get into like permanent design, you can do more. So, yeah.
Were there any comments tonight, Hugh, around I know this isn't a design, but the design of a bulb out that you thought we would take into account that might make this more effective?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And it's good to have the opportunity to follow up on that, because what was shared really is a picture, right? It's just purely a picture, and it's a picture that I drew. So that means it's very much just a picture. But my more talented colleagues can produce actual real designs that we would use. And the color, for example, was mentioned. Like, this is not a recommended color, and the bollards is also not a recommended color of the bollard. So I think very much appreciate and understand that, like, that may not have been conveyed as clearly as it could be. But the idea just being like, this is the space that would be kind of restricted from vehicles is what it's meant to convey. So you can see that part clearly. But in terms of actual design, it would probably be much different.
So it could be like modified to prevent such a wide curve.
For sure. Yeah. And I think we would have to look really closely at that right turn movement from Menlo onto University to make sure that could be made without, and I think, as Commissioner Coleman stated, like really negatively impacting people's ability to make that turn in a way that's safe. Because certainly if they're hitting the vehicle in the other lane, that's also something we want to avoid. So that's definitely something we can do kind of turning templates, they're called, to look at how vehicles turn and what vehicles can make a particular angle of turn.
Okay. Just have two more things quickly and we'll go to other commissioners. But in terms of bike safety, I know there were several comments, and I also read some comments that were sent to council members around concern that, let's say, if everyone can picture for a moment, if you're going down Menlo heading toward University and you're a bike and you're going to be making a right with a bollard there, you're going to be asked to sort of merge into traffic instead. And that may present a safety hazard. How do you see that, Hugh? Do you think that's an issue or not?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the use, in particular on Menlo, there's a lot of parking use today, except when you get right at the intersection where it's red curb. But as you travel, if you're biking on Menlo, you're spending a lot of time in the lane. There's a lot of vehicles parked there on a typical day as you travel up and down.
Okay.
And so, unless that, and there is sort of a future project in our transportation master plan that contemplates bike lanes on Menlo, and that would, of course, require substantial parking removal. That would then change that a bit. But I do tend to think that, as you look at this, only when you get right at the intersection, and I think in the short term, there are ways to provide for people biking right at the intersection with, again, as we get into design, is something we can think about. Certainly, bike safety is something that's also very important to us. We haven't seen any bike collisions in this area, I will note, but we have seen a lot of pedestrian collisions.
Okay, that's a very good point. We should pause on that and consider that. Thank you. One more thing though. So I want to mention to the folks who live on the cul-de-sac that my heart goes out to you. I live on Santa Cruz Avenue and I'm constantly waiting for a very long time for traffic to slow down and let me get out of my driveway. One of the things when I first took a look at this was, and I learned that the ped collisions were really happening on the Menlo crosswalk, was I was sort of scratching my head and trying to figure out why we were addressing the university crosswalk, which was absent of ped collisions. I know that's also a complicated aspect of the intersection, but I was concerned that if we took away the turn lane, you get back up into Santa Cruz traffic. I was also concerned, I think, Marge, I think was your name. Thank you. I was also concerned because I too see that bottleneck of people, trying to get into that parking lot at Drager's. And I thought, okay, they're going to take away a lane and it's going to get really complicated. So I guess my question to you, Hugh, is what are we trying to solve for on University, that part of the crosswalk? It's a bit more obvious to me on the Menlo side.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely the Menlo crosswalk is the one that, that we think is most important. On University, so a couple of things to note, like one of which is the fundamental design of the street isn't changing. So right now, as you approach the parking lot that's right adjacent to Drager's, there's a kind of what's called a two-way left turn lane. That would remain. And so people turning into that parking lot would still be able to turn into that parking lot. And then the people in the outside lane, the way it's shown now, would kind of merge into that lane after that. So those people would be waiting. If you're in that space, you're waiting to turn. And then everyone else would, kind of venture through. And we might think about, again, maybe some bollards in that space to really clearly separate those streams of traffic, actually, which could help. So that's, there are little things like that. I think as we get into design, we could think about a bit more. And then in terms of what we're trying to solve for here, really, it's really just that, where you have kind of multiple vehicles traveling, because some of those vehicles are making a left turn, right? And so even for the people in the Menlo crosswalk, understanding what the vehicles are doing that are coming from University, right? Just getting a little bit of clarity of like how many of them they have to figure out are making what particular move they're making. And again, with that kind of clear there, it's like, is there a vehicle that you need to be concerned about or not? You just sort of simplify it from 2 down to 1.
Now that I understand from, I'm sorry, is it Catherine? Catherine's comment that if you're crossing the crosswalk there, it simplifies things to have 1 lane. I think from the perspective of someone crossing the Menlo crosswalk, that's less obvious to me because I'd only be concerned with the people in the left turn lane on University. But I understand that, as John said too, like it's good to simplify for sure. All right. Well, I guess my comments generally are that I did want to ask about bicycle safety with the bollards. I also, it seems to me that the Menlo crosswalk is a really compelling case there. It almost feels like there might be more that needs to be done, as Commissioner Almo was suggesting, around University, and maybe that's more of a long-term project, but I'll let other commissioners speak. Anyone else? Comments or anything? About the recommendations? Anything over there? Sure, Commissioner Abruzzi.
So I've been looking at these data for a long time and have been frustrated. I bike through that intersection more than I walk through it, but when I go to Drager's, I do tend to park in that corner lot. And I've heard, actually, I remember when we were talking about a Drager's loading zone and reconfiguring the Drager's parking lot and work in the Drager, that I remember Mr. Drager saying that people were scared of that crosswalk. And so that wonderful private parking lot that Draeger's people can use does not get used as much as it would because that crosswalk is scary. So I think that it's great that we're addressing this. And I love the idea of quick build projects and pilots. I know Ms. Zlowski has brought up David Price's comments about this, but that wasn't a quick build. That was concrete that got put onto Santa Cruz Avenue. This is temporary. We've done this in Bellhaven recently. And so this can be iterated on and changed without, great expense to the communities. So I love that we're doing this. I do feel like maybe based on what I've heard tonight, it might make sense to go with option 1 first. Partly because I wouldn't want to conflate option 1 may solve a lot of the problem with less aggravation. If people are annoyed about any kind of delay and they associate it with option 1, then it could be a little bit of if option 1 solves 80% of the problem, but we get 50% more anger by doing option 1 and 2, then maybe we should try option 1 first. And if that goes well, but we still see problems, then we could do a little more quick build. That would be my thinking. The other thing I was thinking about as a pedestrian is right now when you see people, when you're crossing Menlo and you see people in the left turn lane, they're going to turn left even if they don't signal, and half of them don't. What's scary is if you're in that crosswalk and you see somebody in the left turn lane, but it's also a through lane, so you don't know whether they're turning or not, because then you're really depending on a driver to be playing by the rules and paying attention. But I do generally appreciate simplifying and narrowing with these crosswalks. I don't have much more to say. Oh, the other thing I'll say about complexity is I read this really great article that I encourage other people to read called Texting in Your Risk Gap. And somewhat counterintuitively, when it feels easy and open and turns feel really, help me out here, not too sharp, they're nice and round and you can sort of cruise around them with one hand on the steering wheel and the other hand on your earpiece or whatever. People have more accidents, they drive faster, they're less attentive. Our brains naturally want to occupy themselves with things. And so when it gets a little more complicated to drive, we pay more attention to the driving and less attention to the person in the car next to us or the whatever else we're doing. And I think when a situation where we have a lot of pedestrians, a lot of driveways, a lot of intersections in a small compressed space, one of our hubs in our city, I think that's appropriate to make it, to force people to pay a little more attention. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And I'll note actually, when we did a speed survey in our city, the part of Santa Cruz Avenue that goes through downtown, the speed limit is 25 on Santa Cruz Ave all the way from one end of the town to the, out to the cemetery now. But I remember the speed survey downtown, people were going really slowly. I think the average was like 16 or 21, or it was below the speed limit, partly because people are stopping and starting, but partly I think because people are paying attention and they see pedestrians and they slow down. And because we know that speed is the biggest factor in pedestrian deaths, that too, I think is not a bad thing. So having people slow down and pay attention is great. I would be supportive of options 1 and 2 or option 1, whatever my colleagues think, but I don't think we need to redesign it too much from the dais since these are just concepts. And I'll listen to what other people have to say, but if other people are in agreement, I'll even make a motion. So.
Thank you, Katie. I actually would like to inquire about the timeline that you're thinking of here, Hugh. Do you already have a timeline set? Are we looking another year of, temporary suggestions?
And just to be clear, you're talking about the timeline for how long they would be installed or when we'll get to it?
Encompassing the whole project.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that we don't have a precise timeline for when we would install them. My hope would be, and again, this is a relatively small effort because it's just one intersection. So we still need to, do a little more outreach, make sure we're really reaching the community. We need to make sure council is engaged in this process. So that'll take at least a couple months and then a couple months for us to design it. So it could be as soon as this summer that we would install it, but I'm not going to make a specific promise because there's a lot of other things we're trying to do right now. And then, I think we would want to have them out there for a good 6 months, before we kind of come back to it, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less, depending on what else is essentially on agendas and one thing and another.
Can I ask one more quick question? Sorry. Are there delivery vehicles going through that? I was remembering the Drager's loading zone discussion. Do we have a lot of box trucks coming through that intersection on a regular basis? And do we need to take that into account when designing the width of the lanes and the turning radius?
Do you know the answer?
Yeah, we don't know the specific amount, but definitely there's enough trucks going around the intersection that will definitely take that into account when we're doing the
You're
conceptual
on it.
design.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other commissioners? Brucey, King? Commissioner King?
I wanted to know if there's an option 1.5. And that is because I think option 1 is great in terms of
Do you want to lean forward just a little more?
addressing our, excuse me?
Just lean forward toward the microphone a little bit more so we can hear you.
Like karaoke.
Like right up like this.
Really addressing our pedestrian concerns. But when I look at option 2, and I'm thinking about the concerns of the people walking from the cul-de-sac street, I wonder if we can just do the bulb out that's closest to Menlo Ave, as opposed to the one which limits it and constricts it to 2 lanes. Because I'm looking at your volume reports, and the volume reports on the southbound lanes, both going straight and turning left onto Menlo Ave, coming from University from Santa Cruz, are the highest of all the volumes. And it's the least amount of stretch of roadway. So I'm concerned that if we create a bottleneck there, we're going to exacerbate a problem. And so I wonder if we can eliminate that option, continue with the 2 lanes, protect the people walking from the cul-de-sac toward Drager's with that mini bulb out, and along with option 1.
To follow up on a question related to what you just said, if you only did the mini bulb out, would it still reduce the traffic lanes to 1?
Yes. So the way, I mean, again, and apologies, it's just a picture. So you can see what we've done is that there's a sort of bigger bulb out, and then the lane kind of shifts to create a little bit of that. So it's like, probably trying for too much precision with the drawing here, but essentially, I don't think that there's a way for us to do a bulb out there and maintain 2 lanes is the simple answer.
I do want to commend Commissioner King, because that's a really excellent point around the distance and the volume there and going in that direction. Could we throw up the diagram just one more time? Because I think it is useful as we all talk as a group. Thank you. Commissioner Brucey, did you have anything? Or I'm sorry. Cyprian.
I do.
Okay.
I've been ever so quietly making a list. So I guess I'll just start with the super simplest question, which is, what if we just tried a high visibility crosswalk? Like, I guess as I'm looking, I am hearing all the concerns, and I definitely one pedestrian is too many. So I can see all that. I guess I just part of it is we have a crosswalk that's not very visible. And so I wonder in terms of stages of implementation, if we couldn't sort of try the least restrictive thing, which is a higher visibility crosswalk. So I guess my first question is that. I could pause if there is an answerable thing there.
I mean, so one, we can, yes, obviously that is something we could do. I think the number of collisions there makes me want to do more than just that for the trial, but.
Okay. And then it'll lead me straight to my second thing, which is really as a cyclist, the bulb outs are I don't like the way they push bikes into traffic. Although Menlo Avenue is pretty much a Sharrow the whole way, so you're already in the lane. The thing that I find as a regular rider in the middle of that lane is that whatever car is behind me doesn't like it. They're prone to pass on that double yellow line if they can. And I concerned that when we put all the straight and right turners all in one lane there, that it's going to stack up, and there's no place for the bikes to go that isn't in that stacked up line, which means they're going to ride on the sidewalk, because you can see that at the other end of Menlo at El Camino, where they're all stacked up on the sidewalk because the line of cars is too long and there's no room for bikes. So that just creates more hazard right there on that corner. And then, so that's the bulb out thing. One of the things that comes up both here and in pretty much like every single Complete Streets thing I've been to over the last 3 years is driver behavior. Like so many problems are connected to driver behavior and speed. And I just, because I feel like I say this at every meeting, I do ponder about the sort of enforcement education piece, like how are we helping our drivers to just not, anyway. And then bike behavior goes into that because we have bikes not stopping at stop signs. Another thing that this is not my idea. I don't even remember where up here somebody thought of it, but I also wondered about the effect of moving the crosswalk that crosses over University and putting it at the intersection where the Draeger's parking lot is. And I wonder about putting 2 high visibility crosswalks at that corner and whether that would increase drivers' awareness of pedestrians there. And then it's not kind of in the middle of the block on that other side, and it's not connected to the whole keep clear, stop, all that mess. So that's another thought I had. And also agree totally with Katie about drivers not using turn signals and that making it a lot less predictable if they're all in the same lane. And so I guess the end answer I have is that I could kind of be coaxed into option 1, but I definitely don't want option 2. I just feel like it's so likely to back itself right up into Santa Cruz. And then that is another mess of bikes and cars trying to negotiate their way. Anyway, those are my general thoughts, and I'm happy to hear everybody else.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Anyone else? I have something to follow up on. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Seabrian.
I totally forgot when I was looking at my notes. First, thank you so much for putting all the time and effort into creating this pilot and all of the information that you provided us. And I wrote it down. I just forgot to start there. So thank you.
Thank you, staff. So to follow up on what Commissioner Seabrian was asking about bikes and bollards, I've been kind of obsessing about that myself. Is it permissible for bikes, and is it something we don't mind or even think of as beneficial for bikes to drive through the bollard area? Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I think the short answer is yes. Again, if it was a real, it's simulating a bulb out, right? And so if it was a real bulb out, it would be raised and then it wouldn't be able to. But in the time where it's not a bulb out, I think we'd want some caution, but I think that's fine, especially the younger or less confident bicyclists. I think it's a reasonable approach for them.
And also to Commissioner Seabrian's point about increasing visibility, starting with that simplest solution first of a crosswalk. If we look at the Menlo crosswalk for a moment, what would be some of the things we could do, bollards or not, to increase visibility? Because a few ideas have come up. I know I said the fluorescent hockey pucks, which we can discuss. I also do think it's interesting that the collisions are kind of occurring toward the curbs. It doesn't surprise me. That does feel kind of shadowy there. And I do think it's a legitimate recommendation to look at the lighting and the tree trimming and whatever. It's always felt a bit darker in those corners to me. So I wondered if there was anything that comes to mind, Hugh, that you could help us think about in regard to both the Menlo crosswalk and the University crosswalk around just simply solutions to increase visibility.
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know that there's more that we haven't sort of put into it at this time. But I guess what I will do is certainly take the, the thinking and the, direction and we do, always kind of keep thinking about what else could we do or how else could we do this in a way that sort of makes it easier for folks. And, not to make a suggestion that could make it also harder. We don't have to start with post, right? We can also start with just lines and paint and stuff like that, and then move on to post. Again, it's not something I would recommend. I think at that point it becomes too many stages, and we don't really have the staff time to do that. But
I agree. I have final questions about stop signs and stop sign visibility or calling one's attention to stop signs. So when I went, before the meeting, I went out and took some photos today. Kevin, we're not going to put them up. I think I don't want to take too much time, but there was two things I was looking at. One was John, I think Richard Drager, who probably is a relative of yours, he wrote the mayor in November after one of your employees was hit on the crosswalk. And I did read that letter in preparation for the meeting. And he made a comment around the stop sign right at the Drager's entrance here, where the Menlo crosswalk comes up to that entrance. It was something about how historically the stop sign had been moved several times because there was some thought that maybe the stop sign's placement in relation to where the crosswalk wasn't necessarily making it any safer. So I did look at that. I don't know a lot about stop signs and where they should be placed in relation to crosswalks, but there was sort of a significant few feet gap between the stop sign and the crosswalk. So I don't know if that makes any difference. But I took a photo, I'll send it to you. That might be one thing we want to take a look at. The other thing I thought about when I was walking on Menlo toward this crosswalk, I was on the right-hand side, the Drager side. It's just, it's not the most obvious stop sign in the world, and nor, so I thought, should we think about putting a sign up there that at least just says like stop ahead, or whatever those signs say, but you know what I mean? Like, stop is ahead. The same thing goes when I was walking down University toward that crosswalk and the whole keep clear thing. There's a very obvious sign that said, keep clear. But I think there could have been a sign that said something like stop ahead, because all you're doing is relying on people to see that stop sign. They're thinking, okay, I've got to keep this clear. And some other people have said this tonight, but I've definitely seen the behavior of people like, oh, I've got to keep this clear. I'm stopping. And they almost think that where that keep is written is the stop. And then they blow through the stop. So I think maybe we could do a bit more there in terms of improving the behavior of drivers. Maybe we should, staff could take a look at adding a sign that said like stop ahead or something like that. In both those, it might be a useful addition. Certainly doesn't solve the problem, but the signage there might be a useful addition. Okay, well, where I'm coming out on this, and I definitely appreciate other commissioners' points of view, is to proceed with, I like the idea of proceeding with the bollards and the paint and the bulb outs on option one. I've listened to what you've said tonight, Hugh, about how at this point, given the number of collisions, maybe it's something that's really worth trying. And the fact that the bicycle accomplished or experienced bicyclists could navigate that bollard area in the way it's designed now, I think is a positive. I like the idea that some of folks have raised tonight of maybe starting with option one and seeing how it goes and not necessarily proceeding to option two right now or trying them at the same time, because we all know it is a complicated intersection. And I am very curious if we should really, following up on Commissioner Altman's comment, take a bit of a longer term planning view on some of these issues with University here. And as Commissioner Seabrian said, think about the placement of the crosswalk and think about the placement of the crosswalk in relation to this keep clear thing and see if we can somehow simplify that. And if that would be beneficial. As you said, it would require a curb enhancement. So it sounds like a longer term issue there, but I think that might be, it seems like it would make some sense. Yes, Commissioner Seabrian and then Commissioner Burzzi and then Commissioner Seabrian.
Okay, here we go. I gotta say, I don't love the idea of moving a crosswalk away from a stop signal. I don't like the uncontrolled crosswalks we already have in our city. They tend to be places where people are, it really. No, I think, okay, am I misunderstanding? I thought you were talking about moving it away from the stop sign.
I want to move it to the stop sign that's on the other side of the intersection.
Oh, so you want people to walk? Oh, so you want people to have to do two crossings to get to Drager's from their homes instead of one?
If they live in that one section, but what about the people who live? Yeah.
Oh, so I love the idea of adding crosswalks. I don't know why we would take one away.
Okay, I'm good for adding.
Okay.
I don't mind adding.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Additional crosswalk, yay. Like
Yeah.
taking away a
Partly
crosswalk for the
it's-
Menlo Ave
right.
residents, why would we do that?
I just feel like it
Okay.
would help improve, like increase the visibility if there's
Sure,
an extra
totally
crosswalk
agree,
going there.
totally agree. Sorry, good.
I don't need to take it away.
Did you hear all that, Hugh and Kevin? That was very
We did. I think so.
bracing dialogue.
So a couple things to know, one of which is that there are driveways, and it's not clear that if we move that crosswalk that we can avoid a driveway and we can't have a crosswalk land in a driveway. So we can definitely look at it again. I think we have looked at it in the past.
Mm.
I would say, and I think it's a good point, the crossing that's challenging, that we know is challenging, is Menlo. And so if we move the crosswalk, we're making everybody use that Menlo crosswalk as a pedestrian. And so I don't know that I would recommend it. I'm not saying that it, again, I guess my reaction to this is like, interesting idea, something to think about long-term, and we can do more sort of analysis and thinking about it. But just, sort of off the cuff here, there, I would have some concerns about just moving it. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't possibly also have a second crosswalk if it would fit and there weren't driveway conflicts, which Kevin thinks there are.
I think we can also touch on adjusting the angle of the crosswalk, correct? So it's not angled inward, but a straight line.
Yeah, ideally, we want all our crosswalks to be as straight as possible. So the angle is there entirely because of the issue with people exiting from the portion of Menlo Avenue that you've heard residents describe tonight. So essentially what you have is a space for one car at the stop sign. So as they come through, there's somebody clears, they go through the Cleep clear, they stop, and then it's their turn to go. But I think as people have indicated, when you're back at that first place where people think about that as a stop, they can see kind of what's happening and they can say, oh, I think I can fit through. And then they just go through the stop sign because they're, so yes, we could think about reducing the angle, but then again, it's like you would be then encroaching onto the space that people need to get out in that sort of keep clear zone. So it's really complicated and not easy to solve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I gotta say the weirdness of that crosswalk might be part of why that one is not as dangerous as the other one. I mean, there's a lot more traffic there.
Well, it's also, again, I'm going to dwell on this forever, but it is sort of better lit in my view, more visible. Okay, well, maybe we can start to get around.
Can I have one more comment?
Of course. I'm sorry.
That's
Commissioner
all right.
Segreen, go ahead.
Mostly I'm just looping back to this thing about how Menlo exits out onto University. And I'm thinking about all the people who are still driving to get to Hillview because it's our one middle school in town. And because you can't turn left on Santa Cruz, like if they're coming from the other side of town to get to Hillview, it's kind of Menlo. And so I just, I'm a little bit leery of all those people being just a little bit, and anyway, so that I'm just having some hesitancy over reducing it to one lane there. And I'm just gonna have to listen and work through it.
Did you see the data on I mean, it's not very much of a delay. It's really not. It's like a car or two, right?
I guess what I sort of, when I try to parse that out, I feel like it's an average delay. So that delay it's a much larger delay if you plan to turn left onto University than it is if you plan to turn right, because there's more people turning right from Menlo onto University, I think, than there are turning left, at least in my, the 2 times a day I roll through there. And so I feel like when it's going to back up, the right turn cars were already backed up. It's the left turn cars that are going to bear most of the time delay, is my feeling.
One thing to know, if I may, through the chair, the modeling work that we do assumes people are efficient and have perfect information, right? And so at any kind of complex intersection, there is more delay than there is at a simple intersection, because again, it's like you have to look and say, like, is it my turn or is it their turn or is it their turn? And like, which thing am I doing? So even though, yes, you would definitely have more delay in these situations, you might have more delay than the more delay that I showed you earlier. I said that in the most confusing way possible.
I got it.
Say that again.
Say it again.
He can't, there's no way for him to say it again.
I said there would be more delay than the more delay that I showed you earlier.
So it sounds like there's a generalized concern about traffic movement. If we're looking at option one, traffic continuing to flow and getting to schools and getting to people in cars where they need to go by taking that down to one lane on Menlo.
But if you look at the volumes, that westbound lane of Menlo has the least amount of volume of every lane. It only has 55 vehicles per hour, as opposed to turning west off of Menlo and every other option. So it's a concern, but it also has the long street. So more flexibility.
I mean, that's why it would be a trial. All right, well, maybe maybe I can take a stab at a motion and see if we agree. See if we can come together and agree on it. What if the motion is that we approve what was the term you used for the trial? Quick build. A quick build pilot of option one in the interest of reducing pedestrian collisions that have been occurring at this intersection, in particular on that crosswalk. And then let's add to the motion that we're asking the city staff to evaluate the benefit of a few other enhancements. And to that list, I would propose better visibility in the Menlo crosswalk, including looking at lighting, tree shading, potentially fluorescent hockey pucks, like I said before. But hey, I think it's really important to try to increase visibility at this crosswalk because of the safety risks that we've seen. And robust public outreach and ability to provide feedback in the course of the pilot, and potentially adding, or the staff evaluating adding, a stop ahead sign before both the Menlo crosswalk and the University Avenue crosswalk. That would be where I would end up. So let's have at it, because we should probably start chiseling away and getting to a place we all agree. Anyone want to add anything or change anything to that?
So through the chair. So all we need from you tonight is direction. So you're welcome to make a motion. That's great. We're happy to have it, but just sort of general agreement on which things you collectively think we should pursue is sufficient in this case, because we're not. Yeah.
So we don't have to make a motion.
You don't have to. Yeah.
We don't have to.
You don't have to.
Okay. Well, do we have general agreement on the thing that I just said that wasn't a motion? On the sort of summary of an approach that we feel comfortable taking. Does anyone have any comments? Anyone strongly disagree with something or feel very uncomfortable proceeding with? Commissioner King, Commissioner Coleman down there. So just Commissioner King, I can tell Commissioner King has her head to the side. So I must ask.
I'm thinking about option one and the bulb outs on both sides and wondering if perhaps both sides is limiting the traffic too much when you make the left turn.
Make the left turn, okay.
Make the left turn coming down Menlo, coming down University onto Menlo, which had the highest volume of traffic. with that
I
left
see.
turn, 266 vehicles. And if you are limiting it too much by having that bulb out on the right, or is that bulb out on the right-hand side here of Menlo really to prevent the traffic? Are those incidents occurring because of right turns coming off of University onto Menlo?
So there are both situations that happen, and it's again, the bulb out is really on that location meant to sort of make pedestrians who are crossing more visible to people who are turning from either direction.
And it's not having the effect of reducing a lane on that side.
There's only ever one lane?
There was always one lane on that side. It was the two lanes were on the
Correct.
Drager entrance side.
Yeah, it would be, as you can see, sort of generally it would be smaller than the other one would be, because it wouldn't take up the space of an entire lane. There's essentially about a parking lanes width of space and all dimensions imprecise at this point.
Well, I
So-
think what was said earlier is the whole idea of reducing a crosswalk so that pedestrians have as little amount of time in a traffic zone as possible is what the priority is here. And if putting the bulb outs on both sides achieves that in option one and eliminating option two, which would complicate the traffic, then I think that option one is really where we need to go.
I think the lane reduction actually has that additional benefit of making it easier for pedestrians and cars to be aware of each other. Everywhere we have multiple lanes, like with crosswalks, I mean, Alma Ravenswood is the really bad one, I think. Or there are ones on El Camino, people get killed every year.
Yeah.
It's just one car will stop and the other one all it takes is one person rolling the right turn,
Right.
because they think they know what's happening. And some kid on a bike, because it's always going to be like, rollerblades, because that'll come back in fashion at some point in the next 10 years. Just, jets out. Yeah. I don't, by the way, think that anything about this design change is going to induce cyclists to use the crosswalk. I do think what we're going to have, because I've seen this with Santa Cruz and I saw this on Newbridge, is that cyclists will temporarily during the pilot freely and enthusiastically use the protected section where behind the paint and the bollards to have their own little sort of segment of bike space, which to be fair, they should have, and there hasn't been room for it, but it would be nice if there were. And so what I would encourage staff to think about is, are there creative options for longer term designs that facilitate that down the road? Because it's hard for somebody to get used to something like that. And then
Yes.
to find out that, oh, now it's
They're
going to
gonna
be
hit
a sea of,
concrete, yeah.
now it's going to be concrete.
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah.
you just have to be careful that those cyclists don't hit the pedestrians.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. Because they're another lane of traffic. And if
Oh.
they're middle schoolers turning right, they're not really stopping at that stop sign.
Oh, there you go. So our design team over there, how do you think about that? Like if we're going to assume that bikes are going to be riding through that sort of bollarded area and maybe even permanently, how do we get them to behave better and interacting with pedestrians? I think that's a really good design question and a valid one.
Yeah, and I would say it's more than a design question for the reason that Commissioner Bruzi just noted. Right, there's a huge education portion of that, which is how we train both drivers and people who bike and walk, right, how to all use the street safely, which is a critical thing. So certainly something we can think about and take into consideration with future design.
That's great because we don't want to make that like a shoot, like a middle school bikers bike shoot as they fly through the crosswalk either. Yes, mostly for sure. All right, then. Well, it sounds like the general approach we're recommending is option one. And I think we've touched on the ideas we had, the thoughtful suggestions all around about, making people behave well, including signage. And also, as Commissioner Bruzi just raised, the issue of bikes going through the bollarded area, respecting pedestrians. We've talked about, increasing visibility of crosswalks. Let's really rack our brains to think of all the ways we can do that. So I think that's all on the record. All right, then, can we close out this discussion because we're not going to make a motion and we do have general agreement on the approach just outlined. So I think that closes E2 and we'll go on to informational items unless someone has an objection. Okay. Under informational items, city staff provides an update on matters of importance to the commission. Informational items are not action items. However, a commissioner, city staff member, or a member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The one informational item tonight is updating on major project status, and I'd like Kevin to proceed with an update.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So just a quick few updates on ongoing projects that we have going on. As many of you know, we've been working on installing Always Stop at a few key locations within the city. Happy to announce that as of last week, we were able to successfully put in those Always Stop signs and the striping that goes along with it as well. So key locations, Middle, Summertown, obviously, Ringwood, Van Buren,
Oh, yes.
and then a few others along Elm
Yes.
that we came to the commission a while ago for some feedback on. So happy to announce that it's finally in the ground. For the Quiet Zone study, we have a set date for the community outreach meeting. So it is set for March 23rd. The event is on the our city calendar as well. So definitely feel free to mark that on the calendar if you're interested in attending. I believe it's going to be both virtual and in person as well, right? So yes, if you can attend in person, feel free to join by Zoom. Lastly, just so that you, for those that are interested at the shuttle program evaluation study, we're very close to selecting a consultant to do it. So if you're interested in that area, definitely want to stay tuned for that.
Great.
Also, one last one would be the particularly the intersection of El Camino and Ravenswood. As many of you know, we're currently working on adding that fourth missing crosswalk for that intersection. So this is the one where you are essentially crossing, I guess it would be the south leg of El Camino. We'll work through the design or working through the design, communicating with Caltrans. We do have the funding necessary to construct it once it's approved. So along with that, we'll be able to have a couple more improvements that goes into that intersection as well. So very excited for that one too. So with that, I will conclude my major updates.
Quick question. Through the chair.
You go ahead. Yeah.
When will that left turn lane into Middle Plaza be open? Because a couple of times it's sort of a bait and switch. It looks like it's open if you want to make a U-turn, but it's not.
I can answer that. Yeah, so they were Monday and Tuesday, they were finally putting the infrastructure in for the signals to connect, and then it requires Caltrans inspection. So it's any day now, essentially. But until it's an actual left turn lane, we've required them to keep it closed because otherwise it creates a lot of confusion about what you're supposed to do with a bagged signal head.
And yes, Commissioner Brucey Seabreen has a question.
I'm so happy to be confused for Katie. So Kevin, I have a super quick question about that, the always stops on Van Buren and Ringwood. Just to clarify for my own self, on the Bellhaven side of the bridge, there is no stop sign for bikes. On the Van Buren side of the bridge, there's no paint on the ground, but there is a tiny little stop sign that looks like it faces the bike lane and it says Alway. And I'm really trying to figure out if I'm supposed to stop at the foot of that bridge. I kind of do out of habit, but I just want to know if that stop sign's for me or not. Not specifically me, but
Yeah,
like
no,
everyone.
definitely. I think the Bellhaven side, we do have the luxury of a really long runway, if you will, for someone that's coming down. Again, for the other side, we don't necessarily have that. So the stop sign, the smaller stop sign that you saw, is intended for the bikers. Yes.
I'm already stopping, so.
Great. I do too. So yeah, when I go down that ramp.
Patrick, would you like to call for public comment on this item? On major
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole. If you are attending remotely and you have a public comment, please just raise your hand or press *9. And as there are no public comments, I return the meeting to the chair.
Thank you.
No, we do have one. Sorry. Virginia Portillo, you are now the public speaker.
Yes.
Hi, I wanted to comment just briefly on the comment that you just made in regards to the Bellhaven and the stop sign. I think there's over the bridge, there is a light that goes, you can enter north and then you can continue straight to go into West Menlo Park and then jump onto 101 South. And there is a problem unless you drive by there daily which I do because I live on the Haven side, drive and there's a lot of traffic. There is people that actually cut the right lane to get onto 101 North to continue to 101 South. So there is potentially, one, they're cutting off other individuals that are waiting. Two, there's a potential accident definitely waiting to happen, because that's also, they're violating the bicycle area there. So if an individual were to go with a bicycle through there, they could get into an accident. So far, I've never seen, bicyclists travel that way at that time, but I'm just seeing it, and it's a potentially a danger area there. That's a problem that I wanted to actually mention. And I think that I also thought that maybe putting plastic traffic road dividers there so that people that are waiting cannot cut over instead of getting to 101 North and continue and cut off everyone else. I don't know if I'm making sense. I hope I am.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. You're making sense. I think I got a picture. I pull up the Google Maps. But happy to talk with you maybe offline. You can find my contact information on the city website. My name is Kevin Chan. If you do a quick website search, you'll see my contact info. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you about some of the things that you mentioned tonight.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Can I offer just like 5 seconds of feedback about that? Mostly it's that I know exactly what she's talking about. And I find that intersection to be a little bit confusing, because when you're stopped there, there's two like left turn signals that are still green, or right turn signals. They mostly mean, I think, that you could turn right onto, was that northbound? But it looks like they mean for you to be able to go straight if you want to turn right onto southbound. Like, I've looked at it and thought, should I be able to go straight there? Like, I think I'm supposed to stop, but there's 2 right turn green arrows. So I'm just saying a person could believe that they get to go straight there if they're turning right.
Is that something we can address, Kevin, in an agenda setting meeting? Or
I think what we recommend that we start offline conversations,
Yes,
and then
yes.
and then go from there. Yeah.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
Well, my only concern here is who owns that road and overpass and the lighting system? Is it us
Caltrans.
or is it
It's
Caltrans?
Caltrans.
Caltrans,
Yeah.
Okay, Caltrans. Okay, so we'll take that up offline. Thank you for the question. All right. Well, actually, there was another item under informational items, I believe. Kevin, do you have an update on AB 2449 meeting participation?
Great, thank you very much. I do. So if you can give me a quick second, I do want to pull up. Where'd you go? Sorry, apologies. If you can give me 1 second. I was going to pull up basically attachment to the item. It's a little memorandum that was written by the city clerk on some of the ongoing changes that had happened with the expiration of the emergency guidelines. So sorry, give me 1 second.
Actually noticed 2 things about her email, so I'll get to ask them of you in a minute.
Great. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so hopefully you all had a chance to read through this. If you're not, I highly recommend that you take a few minutes to read through it. It essentially kind of highlights some of the changes, like I mentioned, as the expiration of the emergency ordinance that expire as of March of, or I guess as of this month, actually. A couple of things I do want to highlight is essentially for number 2 and number 3, where the commissioners, you do still have the opportunity to use the just cause and emergency circumstances to attend our commission meetings virtually. However, there are some specific guidelines that obviously that pertains to what would qualify as one of those, right? One of the other things that I would like to kind of highlight is that in terms of calling a quorum, only attendees in attendance would be considered part of the quorum. So that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that if any of you are aware of your schedule and would need to attend the meeting beforehand virtually, do let me know as soon as possible, because there are some additional procedures now that will need to go along with that. And that is outlined in number 1. So for example, if you are at a hotel room due to your business trips, you will need to now post the agenda in front of the hotel door. And technically speaking, any public members would be able to go into that building. Same thing with your houses. If you are attending the meeting virtually in your house, technically speaking, you would need to post the agenda on the door, and someone could theoretically attend the meeting in your house if they would do desire. So do kind of take those into consideration. But yes, generally speaking, I do want to just kind of highlight those. And then in terms of the number of frequencies that you can do for each of these 3 big bullet points, as you know, number 1, you just need to let us know as soon as you can before the agenda is published. We will be able to do all the necessary prerequisites to make sure that you have all the paperwork and everything is done accordingly. And of course, the only downside of that, again, is that you would not be counted as a quorum. So we do need at least 5 members in attendance. With number 2 and number 3, those are emergencies. You do have 2 per year that you can exercise those. So meaning, and typically those obviously are emergencies, meaning you probably don't know until the very last second that you don't have a babysitter or there's an emergency that you really can't attend in person. So those would obviously be treated a little differently, but there is a cap of 2 per calendar year. So for us, we have 12 meetings a year, 2 for number 2 and 2 for number 3. So that means 4 total. So sorry, kind of jumping a little bit there as well, but I'm open to answering any questions that you might have at this point.
I do really appreciate that you pointed out that the quorum has to be in person, because that's a significant change. There was something I noticed, it might be on a second page, or maybe I just made it up, about a roll call. There's earlier. Oh, here. So I was looking at this earlier and it says, right, so the additional rules. So if you are participating remotely, it has to be both visual and audio, cameras and mics engaged. And then it says roll call voting required if 1 or more member is participating.
Right. So what that means is typically, if you recall in the past, I've basically just asked commissioners that would like to vote yes or no to raise your hand simultaneously, and I would do that count. In this case, that's no longer applicable. What that means, the roll call votes just means if there's someone attending virtually, what we'll need to do is I, as the liaison, will need to call each of you individually out, and you have to say yes or no. It's just a clear way of addressing your vote and putting that in record. So it's just basically for me to individually ask for your vote and recording that vote based on your preference.
So the person participating remotely will vote, but their presence does not go toward the quorum. Okay. All righty. Yep. Yes, Commissioner Seabrian.
This might be a really silly question, but I like to make sure. It says that you can only have you can only have 2 per year. And I'm assuming that means per individual, not per commission.
That's correct, per individual.
All right. Well, if we have no other questions on that, Patrick, will you call for public comments on that item?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole. For the members of the public that are joining us remotely, if you have a public comment on this item, please raise your virtual hand. In that case, I return the meeting to the chair.
All right, then. Well, I don't think we have any committee subcommittee reports unless one wants to pop in. So with that being said, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:36 this evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.